All right, everybody, welcome to another deep dive. Today, we're taking a closer look at computer memory, specifically that RAM that keeps everything running smoothly, or not so smoothly if you don't have enough.
Yeah, that's the thing, isn't it? I mean, we all know RAM's is important, but like try and pick the right one. It's like a maze of acronyms and numbers.
Absolutely. It's DDR this and DDR that, megahertz, latency, DIMMs.
DIMMs.
Yeah, exactly. So today, we're going to decode all of that.
Break it down.
Yeah, break it down. So first things first, what is RAM and why should we even care about it?
Well, in the simplest terms, RAM is like your computer's workspace, right? The more RAM you have, the more stuff your computer can work on simultaneously without slowing to a crawl.
Okay, so it's like having a bigger desk. You can have more projects spread out, and you're not constantly having to put things away and get them back out just to work on something else.
That's a great way to think about it. It's all about how much information your computer can juggle at once. You wouldn't try to edit a 4K video, stream music, and play a game all at the same time with like a tiny little sliver of RAM, right?
I can barely handle checking my email and browsing the web at the same time sometimes. What are some signs that maybe my computer could use a RAM upgrade? Is it as simple as like the spinning wheel of doom?
Oh, the spinning wheel. Yeah, that's a classic sign. Basically, when you run out of RAM, your computer has to start using your hard drive as like this overflow space.
Overflow space.
Yeah. And accessing data on your hard drive is way slower than accessing it directly from RAM. It's like the difference between, I don't know, walking to your mailbox or sending a text.
So more RAM equals a snappier, less frustrating computing experience.
Got it. Now, I'm curious, what are those little modules called that actually hold the RAM chips? I've heard them called DIMMs.
You are correct. DIMMs. Dual inline memory modules. Those are the little circuit boards that house the RAM chips themselves.
Okay, so DIMMs, got it. But I'm guessing not all DIMMs are created equal. What's up with these different generations of DDR?
Ah, yes. Different generations. We've got DDR2, DDR3, DDR4, and now even DDR5 starting to become more common. And each generation brings improvements to the table, faster speeds, better efficiency. So it's like, I don't know, upgrading from a horse and buggy to a car to a spaceship. Each one gets you where you're going, but the experience is just completely different.
That's a pretty accurate analogy. And just like you wouldn't try to put rocket fuel in your old clunker car,
You'd probably have a bad time.
you would have a bad time. You need to make sure the RAM you choose is compatible with your motherboard.
Ah, compatibility. So that's where things can get tricky, huh? All right, so we've got all these different generations of DIMMs, each one faster and more powerful than the last. But how do I know which generation my computer will actually welcome? You know, like a guest you're actually happy to see and not like, oh no, what are you doing here?
It's all about your motherboard. It's the main circuit board in your computer, and it's kind of picky about who it hangs out with. Motherboards are designed to work with specific generations of RAM.
Okay, so it's like trying to fit a square peg in a round hole. You can try to force it, but it's not going to end well.
Precisely. Trying to use incompatible RAM is a recipe for frustration, maybe even a little bit of smoke, not the kind of excitement we're going for.
Definitely not. So how do we avoid that? Where do we go to figure out which DDR generation our motherboard will actually be friends with?
Your motherboard's documentation is your best friend here. That little booklet, you know, the one, it often gets tossed aside.
Oh, I know the one. It's usually buried under a pile of who knows what in my desk drawer.
Exactly. Well, dust it off because it holds the secrets. It'll clearly state which DDR generation your motherboard supports, whether that's DDR4 or the newer DDR5.
So it's time to dig out that motherboard manual, the Computer Whisperer's Handbook.
I like that. And speaking of generations, let's dive into the differences between DDR4 and DDR5, because that's a pretty important decision point these days when choosing RAM.
Okay, so DDR4 versus DDR5, what's the big showdown? What makes one the, like, superstar athlete of data transfer and the other one, well, you get the idea.
Well, DDR5 is the new kid on the block, and it comes with some serious bragging rights. First off, it's faster. We're talking roughly double the data transfer speeds compared to DDR4. Imagine streaming a movie over dial-up versus, like, a fiber optic connection.
Ouch, yeah, that dial-up flashback. Nobody wants that. So are you saying DDR5 is always the way to go? Should we all just ditch our DDR4 and jump on the DDR5 train?
Hold your horses. While DDR5 is definitely faster and more efficient, it's also, it comes with a higher price tag. And not all systems are compatible with it yet. DDR4 is still a very capable technology, especially for everyday tasks, even some moderate gaming.
So it's like choosing between a sports car and a reliable sedan. Both will get you where you need to go, but one offers a bit more excitement, but at a premium.
That's a great analogy. It's all about finding that right balance between performance, compatibility, and of course, budget. Which, speaking of performance, brings us to another super important aspect of RAM speed and latency.
Okay, let's talk speed. I'm picturing like data racing down a highway at, ludicrous speed.
You're on the right track. When we talk about RAM speed, it's measured in megahertz, MTS. Essentially, this tells you how much data can be transferred per second. Higher MTS equals faster data access, which means smoother multitasking, programs that load faster, just a snappier overall experience.
So higher MTS, it's like having more lanes on that data highway, less congestion, everyone's moving.
Precisely. Now, latency.
Yeah.
Latency is where things get a little bit trickier.
Oh no, tricky.
It's measured in clock cycles, represented as CL, and it refers to the time it takes for your RAM to actually access a specific piece of data when the CPU requests it.
Okay, so if MTS is the highway, is latency like the off-ramp? A lower latency means a quicker exit, right?
You got it. Lower latency means the RAM can respond to the CPU's requests faster. And what does that mean? You guessed it. Faster loading times, smoother performance, especially in things like gaming or video editing where you need data, like yesterday.
So we want a high-speed highway with quick off-ramps for peak performance. Got it. But how do we actually choose the right speed and latency for our needs? Like, how do we know what to look for? Okay, so we've talked about speed and latency, and I'm getting the feeling that finding the perfect RAM is kind of like, I don't know, a high-tech puzzle. How do we make sure all the pieces fit together?
It really is about finding that sweet spot. And just like with the whole DIMM compatibility thing, your motherboard is the key. It has a maximum speed and latency it can handle.
So back to the trusty computer whisperer's handbook.
You got it. The motherboard documentation. It'll tell you the fastest speed and lowest latency that your system can actually support.
Okay, so let's say I find this RAM kit, and it's got like crazy fast speeds and super low latency, but it's a bit overkill for my motherboard. What happens then?
That's a great question. In many cases, the RAM will actually just default to the maximum speed and latency that your motherboard supports. It's kind of like having a race car on a road with a speed limit. You might have all that power, but you're not going to be able to use it.
So no harm, no foul, but maybe not the most cost-effective move.
Exactly. It's always best to choose RAM that actually aligns with your motherboard's capabilities to make sure you're getting the most out of your investment.
Makes perfect sense. Now, are there any other factors we should consider when we're making our final RAM selection? I mean, I imagine not all RAM is created equal, even if the speeds and latencies match up, right?
You're right. There are a few other things to keep in mind. Brand reputation, for one. Sticking with well-known brands generally means you're getting better quality control, better warranties, and better customer support if you ever run into any problems.
Yeah, it's like choosing a well-known brand of, well, anything, really. You just have a certain level of trust there.
Absolutely. Another thing to consider is whether to buy individual RAM modules or to go for a pre-selected kit. Kits are usually a safer bet because the modules are tested to work together, especially when it comes to something called dual-channel performance, which is a whole other topic. But basically, it's like having 2 lanes of traffic for your data instead of just one.
Okay, so kits for the win, especially if we want our data flowing smoothly. Awesome. Any final words of wisdom as we wrap up our deep dive into the world of computer memory?
I'd say remember, choosing the right RAM, it's an investment in your computer's performance. Don't be afraid to consult that motherboard documentation, do your research, ask questions, all that good stuff. A little bit of knowledge goes a long way.
I love it. Well, thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into the world of RAM. Hopefully you learned a thing or two and feel a bit more confident about picking out the perfect memory for your machine. Until next time, may your data flow swiftly.